The morning started like any other in Pinewood, Maine. Joe Harper wiped the grease from his hands onto an old rag. The small garage he owned had been busy all week, with cars needing repair before winter came. His daughter Lily walked in, backpack slung over her shoulder. "Ready for our hike, Dad?" she asked, her eyes bright with excitement. Every Saturday, they explored the forests that surrounded their small town. "Just finishing up," Joe said, closing the hood of Mrs. Watson's old Chevy. "Give me 5 minutes." Soon, they were walking along their favorite trail. The autumn leaves crunched under their boots. Lily took pictures of interesting plants and rocks for her science project. Joe enjoyed these quiet moments away from engines and oil changes. "Did you hear that?" Lily stopped suddenly. A faint humming noise came from somewhere ahead. "Probably just a drone," Joe said, but he didn't sound convinced. The humming grew louder as they walked. It wasn't like any sound either of them had heard before. They came to a clearing that hadn't been there last week. Trees lay flat in a perfect circle, as if pushed down by a giant hand. And in the center sat something impossible. "Dad," Lily whispered, gripping her father's arm. "That's a spaceship." The object was about the size of a school bus. Its metal shell gleamed with a blue-green color that shifted as clouds passed overhead. Parts of it looked burned or damaged, but it was clearly not from Earth. "Take pictures," Joe said quietly. "But don't get too close." Lily raised her phone with shaking hands. As she took photos, Joe walked slowly around the edge of the clearing. The ship had been placed carefully, he realized. This wasn't a crash. Someone had set it down deliberately, like someone dropping off an old car at a junkyard. "Look at this," he called to Lily. A panel on one side was open, revealing strange machinery inside. They'd left it open, like they didn't care who found it. Before Lily could join him, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Within minutes, military vehicles roared up the nearby logging road. Soldiers in uniforms surrounded the clearing, rifles ready. "This area is now under government control," a woman in a colonel's uniform announced as she approached them. Her nameplate read Green. "I'm Colonel Patricia Green. You two need to come with me." 3 hours later, Joe and Lily sat in a hastily built command center. They had been questioned separately, then together. They showed the pictures Lily had taken. "So you believe it was placed there on purpose?" Colonel Green asked. "Yes," Joe nodded. "I've towed plenty of crashed cars. That's not what a crash looks like. Someone parked it there and walked away." Colonel Green tapped her pen against her notepad. "Our scientists are saying the same thing, which raises the question, where are the pilots, and why would they abandon their ship?" A young soldier rushed in. "Colonel, we've found something. Tracks leading away from the site. They don't look human." "Get the search teams ready," Green ordered. She turned back to Joe and Lily. "We're establishing a research base around the vessel. Mr. Harper, given your mechanical background and what you've already seen, I'd like to offer you a position on our team." "I'm just a small-town mechanic," Joe protested. "Who has seen alien technology up close? That's more than most of our engineers can say." Green slid a document across the table. "The pay is good, and you'll be helping protect our planet." "Can I think about it?" Joe asked. Lily kicked him under the table. "Dad, it's a spaceship." A week later, Research Site Alpha surrounded the clearing. Scientists and military personnel worked around the clock. Joe, now wearing a badge that read Consulting Engineer, stood inside the ship with a tablet, taking notes on the strange engine. Outside, satellites scanned the skies. No one knew if the aliens would return. No one knew why they had left their ship behind. But everyone agreed on one thing. Whoever built this ship was far more advanced than humans, and they might come back for what they left behind. 6 months passed since the discovery of the alien ship. Research Site Alpha had grown into a small town of labs and living quarters. Joe Harper now worked full-time with the research team. His garage in Pinewood was being run by his assistant, and Lily visited on weekends when she wasn't in school. Joe stared at the alien engine, scratching his head. "This part here," he said, pointing to a curved piece of metal. "It's not broken. It's just stuck." Dr. Alan Murphy, a thin man with wild gray hair, looked up from his computer. "The metal shouldn't be stuck. It's made of something that doesn't exist on our periodic table." "Doesn't matter what it's made of," Joe replied. "Machinery is machinery. Something is blocking it from spinning freely." Nearby, Olivia Delgado adjusted her safety glasses and peered into the engine's core. After 3 years as an engineer on oil rigs, she had a good eye for practical problems. "Joe's right," she said. "Look at these marks here. Something got caught in the gears." Dr. Murphy joined them, his curiosity overcoming his doubt. The 3 of them worked for hours, carefully removing layers of the engine. Finally, Joe pulled out a small object about the size of a golf ball. "What is it?" Olivia asked. Joe turned it over in his hands. "Looks like some kind of space rock. Got wedged in there good." Dr. Murphy scanned it with a handheld device. "It's blocking a specific frequency." He looked excited. This might be why they abandoned the ship. They thought it was permanently damaged. Colonel Green called a meeting that evening. All the key researchers gathered in the main conference room. Maps and diagrams covered the walls. "So you're telling me," Colonel Green said, looking at Joe, "that this advanced alien species gave up on their ship because of a rock stuck in the engine?" "Not just any rock," Dr. Murphy cut in. "This mineral has properties that interfere with their navigation system. But yes, essentially, they abandoned a billion-dollar ship because of a maintenance issue." Olivia spoke up. "We found several other broken systems that aren't actually broken. The aliens just didn't know how to fix them. Or didn't want to," added Joe. "Some of these repairs aren't that complicated. It's like they gave up too easily." Colonel Green paced the room. "Can we get it working?" Dr. Murphy grinned. "We already have the propulsion system partially operational. And we've learned more in 6 months studying this ship than we would have in 50 years of normal research." As the weeks went by, the team made more progress. Joe and Olivia worked well together, solving practical problems that stumped the scientists. Dr. Murphy provided the theoretical knowledge needed to understand the alien technology. One day, as Joe was installing a modified part, he realized something important. "We're not just repairing their ship," he told Olivia. "We're making it better." She nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I added some improvements to the cooling system. It's 30% more efficient now." All across the ship, the human team was doing the same thing. They weren't just fixing what was broken. They were improving, enhancing, and upgrading. In the control room, Lily visited her father during spring break. She watched as the ship's lights came on for the first time. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Joe put his arm around her shoulders. "It sure is. And it works better now than when the aliens had it." Colonel Green entered the control room with a serious look on her face. "We've just received word from our space observatory. Multiple objects are approaching Earth from deep space." "More ships?" Joe asked. Colonel Green nodded. "Moving fast. And they match the design of this one." Dr. Murphy looked up from his tablet. "They're coming back. But why now?" "Maybe they need their ship after all," Lily suggested. Joe and Olivia exchanged glances. They had the same thought. Would the aliens be grateful for the repairs, or angry that humans had touched their technology? Either way, Earth was about to have visitors. And this time, they weren't leaving their ships behind. The alien ships appeared in the sky 3 days later. 5 vessels, each twice the size of the one found in the forest, hovered above Research Site Alpha. Their hulls shimmered with the same blue-green color as the abandoned ship. Military jets circled at a safe distance. On the ground, soldiers stood ready. But Colonel Green had ordered them not to show aggression. "We don't know if they've come in peace," she said to her team. "Let's not be the ones to start a war." Inside the main building, Frank Martinez prepared for first contact. As the site's communication specialist, He had studied the symbols and sounds found in the ship's computers. He hoped it would be enough to establish basic communication. A beam of light shot down from the largest alien ship. It formed a circle on the open ground between the buildings. Within the light, 3 tall figures appeared. They had 4 arms and skin that looked like polished copper. Their heads were slightly too large for their bodies, with large eyes that blinked sideways. "Showtime," Frank muttered. He walked out to meet them, followed by Colonel Green, Joe, and Dr. Murphy. The tallest alien stepped forward. It wore something like armor with symbols that glowed. The alien made a series of clicking sounds, followed by humming noises. Frank listened carefully, then tried to repeat some of the sounds. The aliens looked at each other, their eyes blinking rapidly. Then, to everyone's surprise, the tall alien spoke in broken English. "We learn your words from ship signals. You have our vessel." Frank nodded. "We found it in the forest. It is property of Voxte," the alien said, pointing to itself. "You will return." Colonel Green stepped forward. "I'm Colonel Patricia Green. We've been studying your ship." The alien's eyes narrowed. "Not for your kind to touch. Too complex." Joe couldn't help himself. "Too complex. We fixed it." All 3 aliens turned to look at him. The leader made angry clicking sounds to the others, then faced Joe again. "Not possible. Ship was damaged beyond repair." "Not for us," Dr. Murphy said proudly. "We've not only repaired it, we've improved several systems." The alien commander, who later introduced himself as Zexlor, demanded to see the ship. The humans led the 3 Voxte to the hangar where the vessel was kept. Zexlor walked slowly around the ship, occasionally touching its hull. The other 2 aliens used small devices to scan it. They spoke to each other in their clicking language, sounding increasingly agitated. Finally, Zexlor turned to Colonel Green. "This ship is property of Voxte Empire. It must be returned immediately." "We've put a lot of work into repairing it," Colonel Green replied calmly. "Perhaps we can discuss some kind of exchange." Zexlor made a dismissive gesture. "We give you these." He held out a small box containing what looked like jewels. "Simple technology for your kind. Good trade." Dr. Murphy examined the offered items and shook his head at Colonel Green. "These are just basic energy crystals. Nothing compared to the value of the ship." Zexlor's copper skin seemed to darken. "You are primitive species. You should be grateful for any gift from Voxte." Joe stepped forward. "Primitive. We fixed what you couldn't." The alien commander stared at Joe for a long moment. Then he turned to his companions and spoke rapidly in their language. The discussion became heated. Olivia, who had been watching from nearby, whispered to Joe. "They're surprised and not happy about it." Finally, Zexlor faced the humans again. "We will discuss with our leaders. You will keep ship safe until then." As the aliens prepared to return to their vessel, Frank noticed something in their behavior. "They're afraid," he said quietly to Colonel Green. "The way they keep looking at our weapons, at the ship. They're not just angry. They're scared." "The question is," Colonel Green replied, "what are they scared of? Us or something else?" After the aliens departed in their beam of light, Joe looked up at their ships hovering in the sky. "They'll be back," he said, "and they'll want more than just the ship next time." The team watched as the alien vessels moved to take up positions around Earth, like guards around a prison. The next day, a new face arrived at Research Site Alpha. Dr. Samantha Reeves stepped out of a helicopter, her curly hair blowing in the wind. As one of the world's top experts in cultural anthropology, she had been called in to help understand the Voxte. Colonel Green greeted her personally. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Dr. Reeves." "Call me Sam," she replied, shaking the colonel's hand. "I wouldn't miss the chance to study the first confirmed alien species." They walked to the conference room where Joe, Olivia, Dr. Murphy, and Frank were waiting. Maps showing the positions of the Voxte ships covered one wall. "They've spread out in orbit," Colonel Green explained. One ship over each major continent. Like they're watching us, Olivia noted. Sam studied the footage of the previous day's meeting. She paid close attention to how the aliens moved and spoke. There's something odd about their behavior, she finally said. When you mentioned improving their ship, they showed signs of both anger and fear. That suggests something important about their culture. Like what? Joe asked. They may value technology as a status symbol. The fact that a primitive species improved their design would be deeply shameful. Sam watched the video again. But there's something else. The fear response seems out of proportion. Later that afternoon, the Voxtai requested another meeting. This time, Zexlor came with 4 guards. They all carried what looked like weapons on their lower arms. The meeting took place in a larger space with tables arranged in a circle. Colonel Green brought Sam along as an advisor. We have new offer, Zexlor announced. We give mining rights on moon of Jupiter. Very valuable minerals there. Colonel Green looked unimpressed. We're already developing our own space program. What else can you offer? Medical knowledge. Cure diseases, Zexlor said. But ship must be returned immediately. Sam whispered to Colonel Green. They're desperate. Push harder. We would need to see examples of this medical knowledge, Colonel Green replied, and share it with medical experts. That could take months. Zexlor's copper skin darkened again. His 4 hands clenched into fists. No time. Ship must be returned now. Why the rush? Sam asked directly. What aren't you telling us? The alien leader glared at her but didn't answer. After more tense negotiations, the Voxtai left again, promising to return with better offers. Sam watched them go with narrowed eyes. They're hiding something big, she told the team afterward. Something that makes time critical. While the diplomats talked, Joe and Lily were making their own discovery. Lily had been allowed to visit the ship again and was using her phone to take pictures of alien writing on the walls. I bet my science teacher would give me an A+ for a report on alien language, she joked. Joe was checking some wiring under a panel when his tool hit something solid that shouldn't have been there. Lily, shine your light over here, he called. Together, they found a hidden compartment. Inside was a small cube that glowed with soft purple light. What is it? Lily asked. I don't know, but they hid it pretty well. Joe carefully removed the cube. Let's show this to Dr. Murphy. In the lab, Dr. Murphy placed the cube in a scanner. It's some kind of data storage device, extremely advanced. Can we access it? Joe asked. I think so. Dr. Murphy connected cables between the cube and their computers. It might take time to translate, but the screen suddenly filled with images and symbols. Star maps appeared, showing a path from a distant star system to Earth. Then came pictures of another alien species, tall, reptile-like creatures with armor and large weapons. Are those the Voxtai? Lily asked. No, Dr. Murphy said grimly. These are something else entirely. Colonel Green was called immediately. When she saw the images, her face grew serious. Get Sam in here, she ordered. And call Frank. I think we just found out what the Voxtai are running from. As they studied the data, one thing became clear. The Voxtai weren't just interested in getting their ship back. They were running from something. Something called the Krell. And now, that something might be headed toward Earth. The data from the hidden cube was shared with the entire research team. Everyone worked around the clock to understand what they were facing. Darren Willis, a cybersecurity expert who had joined the team 3 months earlier, made the next breakthrough. I think I can access more of the ship's systems, he told Colonel Green. There's something like an artificial intelligence on board, but it's in a dormant state. The Voxtai said many systems were damaged, Colonel Green reminded him. Darren shook his head. Not damaged, just turned off. They either couldn't figure out how to restart it, or they shut it down on purpose. He brought in Sophia Kim, a programming genius who had graduated college at 16. Together, they worked on the ship's main computer. 3 days later, The system came to life. Lights throughout the ship began to glow, and a soft female voice spoke in the alien language. Frank rushed to the control room. He spoke slowly in the words he had learned, asking the voice to switch to English. Language adapted, the voice replied. I am the ship intelligence system. You may call me Stella. They named their ship AI Stella. Joe asked. No, Stella replied. You named me. This is what your kind calls the stars. Yes. I am a navigation system. It seemed appropriate. Sophia couldn't contain her excitement. You're fully operational. The Voxtai said you were corrupted. My programming was not corrupted, Stella explained. The previous users lacked the expertise to properly maintain my systems. They consider artificial intelligence dangerous and unpredictable. While Darren and Sophia talked with Stella, other team members continued their work. Carlos Rodriguez, an engineer who specialized in power systems, had redesigned the ship's energy core. The original design wastes nearly 40% of its potential, he explained to Olivia. With these changes, we can nearly double the power output. Across the ship, Nicole Johnson was working on what appeared to be weapons systems. As a former military weapons specialist, she recognized the basic principles. These are defensive shields, she told Dr. Murphy. But they're incomplete. It's like they were still developing the technology when they abandoned the ship. Dr. Murphy studied the designs. If I'm reading this correctly, they were trying to create a shield that could absorb enemy weapons' fire and redirect it. That would be revolutionary, Nicole said, her eyes wide. Even for us, let alone for them. Through Stella, the team learned more about the Voxtai and their culture. They were a species that valued order and tradition above all else. Innovation was rare and often discouraged. The Voxtai believe that stability comes from following established patterns, Stella explained. Those who suggest new ideas are often seen as troublemakers. That explains why they couldn't fix the ship, Joe said. They tried the usual methods, and when those didn't work, they gave up. Precisely, Stella confirmed. They lack what you humans call thinking outside the box. Colonel Green brought Sam to meet Stella. After several hours of conversation, Sam emerged with a troubled expression. The Krell are as bad as we feared, she told Colonel Green. They're conquerors. They've already taken 3 Voxtai worlds. And according to Stella, they're extremely methodical. They never give up once they target a species. Why did the Voxtai come to Earth? Colonel Green asked. They were hoping to hide, Sam explained. They thought Earth was primitive enough that the Krell wouldn't notice us. Then they planned to retrieve their ship later, when it was safe. So they used us as a hiding place, Joe said angrily. And now they've put us in danger too. The next day, the improvements to the ship were nearly complete. What had been a damaged vessel was now something more advanced than even its original designers had envisioned. Human innovation had transformed it into a powerful craft with capabilities the Voxtai had never imagined. Stella, now fully integrated with the ship's systems, ran a diagnostic. All systems are operating at 127% of original specifications. This vessel now exceeds the capabilities of any current Voxtai ship. Colonel Green nodded with satisfaction. Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get. Across the room, a sensor began to beep urgently. Dr. Murphy rushed to check it. Colonel, he called, his voice tight with worry. Long-range detectors just picked up multiple objects entering the solar system. And they're not Voxtai ships. The Voxtai ships reacted immediately to the new arrivals. They moved into defensive positions around Earth, their weapons systems coming online. Colonel Green called an emergency meeting with the alien commander. This time, Zexlor arrived alone and without his usual arrogance. His copper skin looked dull, and all 4 of his hands trembled slightly. The Krell have found us, he said without greeting. We must have your ship now. Colonel Green remained calm. We know about the Krell. We found your hidden data cube. Zexlor's eyes widened. You accessed secured data. We did, Sam confirmed. We know you're running from them. We know they destroyed 3 of your worlds. The alien commander sank into a chair, a very human gesture of defeat. Then you understand. Give us the ship, and we will leave your world. The Krell might spare you. Might? Dr. Murphy asked sharply. The Krell destroy all advanced technology they find, Zexlor explained. Any species with space travel capabilities is eliminated or enslaved. Joe crossed his arms. So you led them here, putting our entire planet at risk. And now you want to run away with the ship we fixed. It is our ship, Zexlor insisted, but with less conviction than before. Colonel Green leaned forward. The way I see it, you owe us. For fixing your ship and for bringing danger to our doorstep. What do you want? Zexlor asked warily. The truth, Colonel Green replied. All of it. What's so special about this particular ship? Why are the Krell following you so persistently? Zexlor was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke in a quieter voice. The ship you found was a prototype. It contains experimental defensive technology that could protect against Krell weapons. Our scientists could not make it work properly. That is why it was abandoned. Dr. Murphy's eyes lit up. The shield system that absorbs and redirects energy. Yes, Zexlor looked surprised. You found it. We didn't just find it, Nichols said from the doorway. We completed it. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Colonel Green was the first to speak. Dr. Murphy, can you confirm this? Absolutely, he replied. Nickel and I have been working with Stella. That's what we call the ship's eye. To finish the defensive system. It's not only operational, but we've improved it beyond the original specifications. Zexlor stood up suddenly. Impossible. You activated the artificial intelligence. It was deemed too unpredictable. By your standards, maybe, Sophia said. We found it quite cooperative. Screens around the room lit up, showing sensor data. Frank studied them with growing concern. The Krell ships will reach Earth orbit in 5 days, he announced. 7 vessels, each larger than anything the Vox-type brought. Colonel Green faced Zexlor. We have a choice. We can give you the ship and hope the Krell follow you and leave us alone. Or, Zexlor asked. We can work together, Colonel Green finished. Our improvements to your ship prove that humans have something valuable to offer. Innovation, creative thinking. Things your people struggle with. Joe stepped forward. The shield technology could be installed on your other ships. We could use the repaired ship as a template. For the first time, Zexlor looked at the humans with something close to respect. You would help us fight. After we endangered your world. We're fighting for ourselves as much as for you, Colonel Green said firmly. If what you say about the Krell is true, they'll come for Earth eventually anyway. The next day, engineers from the Vox-type ships came to Research Site Alpha. They worked alongside the human team, learning about the improvements made to their vessel. At first, they were resistant, often insisting on their traditional methods. But as they saw the results, their attitude slowly changed. Joe found himself teaching a Vox-type engineer named Kellner how to think more flexibly about mechanical problems. Sometimes you have to try something that seems wrong, Joe explained, showing how he had rewired part of the engine. The obvious solution isn't always the right one. Kellner blinked his large eyes. This goes against all our training. But it works better. With the Krell approaching day by day, humans and Vox-type worked together against the clock. The question on everyone's mind was whether their combined efforts would be enough to face the coming threat. With only 3 days left before the Krell arrived, the pace of work intensified. The research site had become a hive of activity, with humans and Vox-type working side by side around the clock. Joe watched as teams rushed to adapt the shield technology to the Vox-type ships. He turned to Olivia, who was checking a set of power couplings. Will we be ready in time? He asked quietly. She wiped sweat from her forehead. It's going to be close, But we got something they don't expect. Human ingenuity. Joe smiled. That, and the fact that we're not giving up. Olivia nodded toward a group of Voxtai engineers who were installing modified components based on the human designs. They're starting to get it now. I saw Kellenar solve a problem yesterday without asking for the standard procedure. Colonel Green had been coordinating with governments around the world. Military forces were on high alert, though everyone knew Earth's weapons would be little use against the Krell. Their best hope lay with the upgraded ships. In the main control room, Lily had been given an important job. Because she had documented everything from the beginning with her photos and notes, she was helping create guides for the rapid installation of the modified technology. Each ship needs these adjustments, she explained to a Voxtai technician, showing diagrams on her tablet. The power system won't handle the shield otherwise. The technician blinked in surprise. You are young, yet you understand our technology. I've been watching and learning, Lily replied. Sometimes kids see things adults miss because we don't know what's supposed to be impossible. Zexlor had changed over the past days. The Voxtai commander now regularly sought human input, particularly from Joe and Dr. Murphy. Today, he approached them with a serious expression. We have received message from Krell Fleet, he announced. They demand we surrender all ships and technology. They say they will spare basic life forms on Earth if we comply. They're lying, Sam said immediately. Based on everything we've learned about them, they don't spare anyone with knowledge of advanced technology. Dr. Murphy nodded in agreement. They see it as contamination. If they knew humans had worked on your ships, they'd consider us too advanced to let live. Then we must fight, Zexlor said firmly. But our ships are few compared to their fleet. Joe had been thinking about this problem. What if we use the original ship as more than just a template? What if we use it as a weapon? Everyone turned to look at him, and Joe explained his idea. The repaired ship, with its fully operational shield system, could absorb energy from Krell weapons. If they modified it further, it could potentially redirect that energy back at the Krell fleet, causing a chain reaction. It's risky, Nichols said after considering the plan. Someone would need to pilot the ship directly into the middle of their formation. I'll do it, Joe volunteered. I know that ship better than anyone. Not alone, Olivia added quickly. You'll need someone to manage the power systems while you fly. Colonel Green looked at them both with respect. If you're sure, then we'll build the rest of our strategy around your mission. The final day before the Krell arrival was spent preparing the original ship. Joe and Olivia worked with Stella to program the complex maneuvers they would need. Carlos made final adjustments to the power core, pushing its capacity even further. Lily hugged her father tightly. Promise you'll come back, she whispered. I promise to try my best, Joe replied, holding her close. But whatever happens, I'm proud of what we've done here. That evening, Colonel Green addressed the combined human and Voxtai forces. The atmosphere was tense but determined. Tomorrow, we face an enemy that thinks they know exactly what they're dealing with, she said. They expect to find frightened Voxtai and primitive humans. Instead, they'll find two species working together, each contributing their strengths. Zexlor stepped forward to stand beside her. The Voxtai have order, discipline, and experience. Humans have creativity, courage, and the ability to see new paths where we saw only dead ends. Together, we are stronger than either alone. As night fell, Joe stood outside looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, the Krell were coming, confident in their power. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The ship that had once been dumped on Earth as garbage was now their greatest hope. The Krell arrived at dawn. 7 massive ships entered Earth's orbit, each one shaped like a spear point. They were dark gray with glowing red lines running along their hulls. Even from the ground, they looked menacing against the morning sky. In the command center, everyone watched the screens as the Krell transmitted their message. A reptilian face appeared, scales glinting under harsh lights. Voxtai fugitives, surrender your ships and technology. Primitive species will be spared if compliance is immediate. Colonel Green nodded to Frank, who sent their prepared response. "This is Earth. We stand with the Voxtai. We will not surrender." The reply came instantly. "Then you will be destroyed together." The Krell ships began to move, forming a circle in orbit. The 5 Voxtai vessels, now equipped with the modified shield technology, rose to meet them. And from the hangar at Research Site Alpha, the original ship lifted off, with Joe at the controls and Olivia managing the power systems. "Stella, status report," Joe said as they climbed through the atmosphere. "All systems operating at optimal levels," the eye replied. "Shield modifications are stable. Power core at 98% capacity." Olivia checked her screens. "We're good to go. Just get us into position." The space battle began with a burst of energy weapons from the Krell ships. The Voxtai vessels activated their new shields, which glowed blue as they absorbed the first volley. "It's working," Dr. Murphy shouted in the command center, watching the data stream in. "The shields are holding." On the main ship, Zexalor directed his fleet with new tactics suggested by the human military advisors. Rather than the rigid formations the Voxtai usually used, they moved unpredictably, confusing the Krell targeting systems. Joe and Olivia piloted their ship straight toward the center of the Krell formation. Enemy fire surrounded them, but their shields not only held, they grew stronger with each hit, just as they had designed. "Power levels rising," Olivia reported. "We're at 120% and climbing. The shields are absorbing everything they throw at us." "Get ready," Joe said, his hand steady on the controls. "We'll only have one shot at this." As they reached the center of the Krell formation, the largest enemy ship fired its main weapon, a massive beam of red energy aimed directly at them. That was the moment they had been waiting for. Instead of trying to avoid it, Joe turned their ship directly into the beam. "Now, Olivia," he shouted. Olivia activated the modified redirect system. The ship shuddered as it absorbed the enormous energy, then channeled it through the enhancements Carlos had designed. A pulse of blue-white light erupted from their ship in all directions. The pulse hit the nearest Krell ship, overloading its systems in a cascade of explosions. But it didn't stop there. The energy jumped from ship to ship, following the connections of the Krell communication network that Darren had identified as their weakness. In the command center, everyone watched in awe as the Krell ships began to fail one after another. Not destroyed, but disabled, their weapons and engines shutting down. "It worked," Lily whispered, then louder. "It worked." Colonel Green put a hand on her shoulder. "Your father did it." The battle wasn't quite over. 2 Krell ships had been far enough away to avoid the cascading failure. They turned to flee, but the Voxtai fleet, led by Zexalor, moved to intercept them. With their new shields and weapons, the outcome was never in doubt. 3 days later, Joe and Olivia returned to Earth as heroes. The disabled Krell ships had been boarded and secured by combined human and Voxtai teams. The Krell, without their technological advantage, had surrendered. In the main conference room, Zexalor stood before the human team. His copper skin gleamed brightly, and he held himself with pride, but without the arrogance he had shown before. "The Voxtai High Council has sent a message," he announced. "They wish to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. They also offer thanks," and he paused, seeming to struggle with the words, "and apologies, for underestimating your species, for treating your world as a place to discard what we could not repair." Colonel Green smiled. "Apology accepted. We look forward to a productive relationship." Later, as Joe and Lily walked together under the stars, she asked, "What will happen to the ship now?" Joe looked up at the night sky, where Voxtai ships peacefully orbited alongside the first human space station. "It belongs to all of us now, a symbol of what can happen when different ways of thinking come together." "From space jump to savior," Lily said with a smile. "All because they didn't know humans never give up on broken things."